Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is Moda, and today we're going to be deep diving into the Beast Mastery spec for Hunters in Shadowlands. Alright, so while Shadowlands is a new expansion, and you're probably looking to get your hands on some shiny new things to play with, BM hasn't received much alteration. And honestly, it doesn't really need it. BM has always been an accessible spec with a pretty basic rotation and can be picked up quite easily. Yet with the implementation of Barb Shot, the spec has actually become the most in-depth of its counterparts, Survival and Marksman. It doesn't suffer from a boring playstyle if pushed to its limits. In fact, it's actually a lot of fun, which is why I mained it for the entirety of BFA. Something about running around like a lunatic without losing damage is extremely satisfying, and opens up doors of opportunity to go above and beyond when helping your teammates in dungeon and raid scenarios. With that being said, let's dive right in and take a look at what abilities have been altered for the Beastmaster. So, with the unpruning of classes, the most anticipated ability for Hunters has returned. Killshot is now a thing, ladies and gents. This is essentially a ranged execute that hits big on a 10-second cooldown, and is activated when your target falls below 25% HP. While this gives BM another button in their rotation, the damage feels pretty underwhelming, and the ability itself has no further interactions, unlike with marksmanship. A missed opportunity, I believe. Stacking this with Killer Instinct gives you a double execute, which could make for some huge last phase damage. Next on the list is Aspect of the Wild, and while it hasn't been reworked, our biggest cooldown has lost the Azerite trait Primal Instincts. This was a huge mastery buff that was attached to the ability in BFA, and now Aspect feels kind of lackluster. On the plus side, however, Aspect now no longer lives on the GCD, thank God. I can say with absolute confidence that it now feels that much better to press. Alright, the most iconic ability to ever be used by a hunter. Guys, I actually hate to say it, but Hunter's Mark has made a comeback, and this time, it's a little different. It's a 5% damage buff that allows you to see stealth targets if tracked, and now is on a 20-second cooldown. If the mark target dies, the cooldown is reset. I didn't realize how much I hated this ability until WoW Classic launched, and I kept forgetting to use it. I wish this was off the GCD or didn't have a damage component to it, so it could be still used in PvP, but I feel like Blizzard have really stuck to their guns on this iteration, and I don't believe it'll be changed before release, so get used to using it, boys. Arcane Shot is also back, and I know you're all really excited to use it, but just please don't do it to yourselves. Please. It does more damage than Cobra Shot, however the focus cost is actually doubled and shares no interaction with the rest of the spec. And as far as I'm concerned, just leave it off your action bars, please. Misdirection has also seen some improvements. You now misdirect all threat you cause to your tank, beginning with your next attack within 30 seconds and lasting for 8 seconds, thank God. This means you can MD your tank well in advance to actually pulling the pack, giving you more time to Hunter's Mark or set up for a pull, or do whatever it is that you like to do in your spare time, I don't know. Guys, Trank Shot is now back in the hands of the hunter, and honestly, I was so happy when I saw this, and it feels so much better than using our pets to purge because their AI is so dumb. It's such a good thing for marksmen as well, because it basically means that now marksman hunters can purge when they're playing as a lone wolf. Alright, now that I've livened up the mood, it's time for me to kill it again, because this next one you're not going to like. Revive Pet. A Revive Pet's cast time is now 4 seconds instead of 2 seconds. And this is the absolute most frustrating thing about playing Beastmaster. It's actually one of the only issues I have with the spec, because this is really that bad. Alright, next on the list, Eyes of the Beast, ladies and gentlemen, has made a comeback despite nobody asking. This allows you to see through the eyes of your pet for 1 full minute. A full minute! And this really fleshes out so many possibilities to take your sick, deluded roleplay fantasies to the next level. And honestly, I'm all for it, guys, go for it. Okay, so due to Blizzard deciding target capping was necessary in an attempt to better balance classes, which I'm totally okay with, as long as every spec and class gets capped. Multi-shot and beast cleave have been reined in to suit this new design philosophy, and now only hit up to 5 targets. Unfortunately, this actually makes BM suffer tremendously in keys and AoE environments, and honestly, I think you'll struggle for the first half of the expansion after this change. Alright, that covers all the ability changes. Now let's have a look at the talents. Alright, Dire Beast. Dire Beast has copped a buff and no longer costs any focus. The beast itself hits like a wet noodle, but now that it costs nothing, it essentially is a 5% haste buff every 20 seconds. A stat that looks to be a Beastmaster's #1 priority in the early stages of the X-Pack. Aspect of the Beast has now changed to increase your pet's damaging abilities and now healing by 30%. And this is most likely our go-to at the start of an expansion. And honestly, the fact that our pets take twice as long to revive now is probably the reason for this change. And God, I'm thankful that it exists. Still make revive pet 2 seconds though, okay, thanks. What's this? A new talent? Bloodshed is our new level 100 talent alongside Aspect of the Beast and Killer Cobra. I'm not gonna lie boys, this one is kind of underwhelming as well. It causes your pet to apply a dot for 18 seconds to the target, which is extremely undertuned right now. And it also increases all the damage your pet takes by 15% while the dot is active? Kinda going for like a berserk vibe? Anyway, hopefully this scales better in the future, but honestly, due to tuning and the nature of its competitors, it looks like it's probably gonna be a dead talent. So the 2 cooler looking talent reworks coming in for BM is Scent of Blood and Spitting Cobra. Scent of Blood has now been changed to grant 2 charges of Barb Shot upon activating Bestial Wrath. Now this seems sleeper, but every time you pop Wrath, you're shaving 24 seconds off of its cooldown, which is kinda strong, particularly early game when we have low crit values and are struggling to get wild call procs. Furthermore, BM seems to be heavily focused around Wrath uptime, with the way some of the Conduits Legendaries are working together, which I'll explain down the line. Next on the list we have Spitting Cobra. Spitting Cobra has been flipped on its head and now summons a Cobra to fight alongside you whenever Bestial Wrath ends, which does nature damage based off of how many Cobra shots you used in your Bestial Wrath window. For each Cobra shot, the damage of the Cobra increases by 10%, but boys, let me tell ya, in this case, 10% of 0 dam is still 0 dam. I mean, my nan could hit harder than this thing, and considering the cost of Cobra Shot is very high, it just feels so bad to play. Look, yes, it is very undertuned right now, however it's an interesting concept, but in reality, the last thing I want to be focusing on while in Bestial Wrath is using my filler ability. It just feels clunky, and if they got it to a place where it outweighed the damage of Thrill of the Hunt or Murder of Crows, I feel like the community would be up in arms, so unfortunately boys, I feel like this is going to be another dead talent. Now Stampede sees its cooldown reduced from 3 to 2 minutes, which people are kind of sleeping on actually. From what I can see, the damage has not been reduced either, so this could pump in the right circumstances. Now BM, as we all know, is a very baseline interactive spec, and the legendaries that are being implemented in Shadowlands actually complement that. Let's take a look. Now currently as it stands, BM Hunter only has a couple of legendaries that do anything significant for the spec output wise. I'll leave the other ones on screen for you to have a look at, but the first legendary effect that I'm going to talk about is Rylax Stalker's Piercing Fangs. Rylax adds a 30% crit damage buff to you and your pets whenever you're in Bestial Wrath, which will be your go-to option for a variety of different playstyles, shining in both single target and AoE. The beauty about this legendary is that it has potential, in combination with our Wrath-focused playstyle, to scale extremely hard. Unfortunately, it's going to take some time to find out how strong it will be later on down the line, but overall, this is a very good option. Next legendary I want to talk about is Quapla Eridan War Order. I hope I got that right, but probably not. Whenever you cast Barb Shot, your kill command is reduced by 4 seconds. The value of this one scales directly with how many Barb Shots you're able to pump out, and traits such as Scent of Blood, and especially one with the pack, will pair well. As the expansion goes on and we increase our Barb Shot casts, this legendary gets better. It lacks in AoE situations however, and is not really worth using in that environment. Let's take a look at the Covenants, and what each one has to offer. BM has a few viable options when it comes to Covenants, and while some are stronger than others in certain situations, I'd be picking whichever one you're drawn to the most. Let's start with the Kyrian. The Kyrian Covenant grants you the ability Resonating Arrow. This ability gives you bonus 30% crit against enemies that stand within, which can be nice in PvE AoE situations, and crit is a favoured stat for the Beastmaster. Passives and talents like Wild Call and One with the Pack scale directly off of the Covenant ability, and our pet damage is furthermore affected by the buff. Even Thrill of the Hunt stacks on top of that. The arrow lines up really well with Bestial Wrath, and popping aspect on top means the Beastmaster can do big damage in that 10-second window. The problem with this spell is that it is a placed AoE ability, which leaves room for mobs to run out of it, which feels so bad. Like seriously, tanks, get it together. Holy shit, get it together and stop moving shit out of my circle, please. Resonating Arrow also has an awesome effect that lets you cast abilities onto targets that would normally be out of your line of sight. This is so cool to use in PvP situations, and I cannot tell you how satisfying it feels to wallbang people with this thing. As a Kyrian, you will also receive the ability Summon Steward. You call a little swolken dude who appears out of nowhere, giving you 3 vials of Serenity. Now this potion heals you for 20% health and doesn't share a cooldown with your health bot or Lockrock, but that's not all. It removes bleeds, diseases, poisons, curses. Things such as Necrotic and Grievous can be cleansed, and all the new dots in the new dungeons can be removed on consumption. Even some of the raid dots, which everyone is considering re-rolling Dwarf for, can be neglected with the Vial of Serenity, making it extremely powerful. Next up, the Necrolord. As a Necrolord, you will receive Death Chakram, and Death Chakram for BM currently seems to do the most single target damage of any other, making it a solid choice if you're focusing on raiding, and in my opinion, the spell effect also looks the coolest. It is useful in all situations and grants focus on each bounce, which definitely helps make BM feel that extra little bit better. While in AoE it doesn't quite match the Kyrian ability, this is definitely one of your best options as a BM hunter. Furthermore, as a Necro Edgelord, you gain Fleshcraft, an extremely powerful defensive, which adds to Hunter's lack of survivability. It's a 4-second channel that grants you a shield up to 50% of your maximum HP. If you channel this on top of a corpse, you also gain a buff depending on which mob type they are. So for example, if you channel over a humanoid, you gain mastery. Channel over a beast, and I believe you gain armor, which makes for some very cool gameplay. Next on the list, the Vampire Venthia. As a Venthia, you get access to Flayed Shot, a dot that has a chance to grant you a charge of kill shot, which can be used despite a target not being under the execute health threshold. Unlike MM though, the Spec has no other interactions with kill shot, and currently, this coveted ability does do less damage than Death Chakram overall. That being said, this is still a very good single target option. As a Venthia, you will also receive the ability Door of Shadows. Door of Shadows is a 2-second teleport on a 1-minute cooldown that works much like a Mage's Blink and visually looks insane. I can see this being used to skip trash Mythic Plus or potentially traversing some awkward terrain. Other than that, it is a very niche bit of utility and situationally dependent. Now last and actually least is the Night Fae ability, and it's called Wild Spirits. Currently this ability is the one that I've tested the least, as it seems to be not fully functional in the beta right now. It's a placed AoE effect that lasts 15 seconds and increases damage done to those in it by 5%. On top of that, each damaging ability you use to those affected cop added nature damage. Now currently BM's Beast Cleave does not proc this. Dot damage outside of the initial cast doesn't trigger it either. Pet abilities obviously don't work. It is just very underwhelming, and an ability that we may have to revisit as we go deeper into the Shadowlands. Soul Shaper, however, utility-wise, is actually pretty insane, and probably the best utility option out there. It's an on-demand blink, and in conjunction with Disengage and Aspect, it gives hunters heaps of different ways to better position themselves, deal with a variety of mechanical situations. Conduits are a new system added in Shadowlands that basically buffs specific abilities in different ways, and is similar to how the relic system worked in Legion. Conduits come in 4 different varieties: Covenant Conduits, which buff your Covenant abilities; Potency Conduits, which buff your throughput abilities; Finesse Conduits, which buff your utility abilities; and finally, Endurance Conduits, which buff your defensive abilities. Let's start with the Covenant Conduits. The Kyrian Covenant Conduit gives your attacks and abilities a 5% damage buff to enemies standing within your resonating arrow. The Necrolord Conduit generates 2 additional focus per bounce, and the damage of the ability is increased by 5%. The Venthia Conduit increases the Flayer's Mark proc chance by 5%, and increases the damage of your next kill shot by 5%. And finally, the Nightfake Conduit increases the ability's duration by 3 seconds, and the damage dealt is increased by 10%. Now, while conduits don't look that strong on the surface, they have 15 ranks, and their added bonus effects scales respectively. As we level them up, your character and abilities are going to become much more powerful. It's important to note that as of the date of this recording, we have no information on how we're acquiring these leveled up versions of conduits, and when in the timeline of the expansion we will have each rank. This is concerning because I guarantee that the conduits are going to be the biggest factor regarding player power and how much damage we deal. Let's have a look at the potency conduits. The first potency conduit, called Bloodletting, reduces the recharge time of barb shot by 1 second and increases the dot damage by 10%. This conduit is just feeding Frenzy trait reworked, which will be strong in early Shadowlands. And while the damage increase isn't that important, this conduit will allow you to maintain more uptime on your Frenzy stacks. Echoing Call increases the chance of barb shot to reset off of a critical strike auto by 5%. As we scale, this trait will become more important. Pairing it with one with the pack, we may see an insane amount of barb shot procs again, like we did in BFA. This will give you more stomp damage, as well as a higher Beast of Wrath uptime, which is great. Ferocious Appetite makes it so that when you kill command, you shave off 1 second off of the cooldown of Aspect of the Wild. Now, while this sounds insane due to more interactive gameplay, as I've said before, Aspect as a cooldown is now extremely underwhelming due to the loss of Primal Instincts, and therefore I don't consider this conduit to be that good. And finally, One with the Beast makes it so that Beast of Wrath increases all you and your pet's damage by an additional 1%. Now, you must remember that these conduits scale, so this conduit in particular, further down the line, will be extremely good, if not our best conduit. Now guys, for the sake of not making this video go for too long, I'm going to leave the Finesse and Endurance conduits on screen. These conduits will directly add bonuses to a variety of utility that the Hunter spec has to offer. Overall, Beast Mastery, I feel, while not receiving many changes, is in a great place, and is a spec that is accessible to everyone. It allows people who want to play at the higher end to delve deeper and really min-max in a way that is very appealing to a variety of players. It feels good to know that when you press an ability such as Barb Shot, there are many interactions at play, and that your rotation choice means something. The cooldown reduction style of play is one that I've always enjoyed, which is why I mained BM in BFA for the entirety of the expansion. It has some really cool interactive legendaries, while not many of them, and the conduit system really fleshes out your already great abilities, allowing for some interesting gameplay decisions. It is a decent single target competitor, and while it has all these positives, I'd like to list some of my concerns. Animal Companion. Unfortunately, this talent seems to scale really well, and is usually an option we pick later down the line of an expansion. The AI of the second pet, however, is abysmal, and something that infuriates me to high heaven. When you take Animal Companion, you receive a 35% damage reduction aura to your pets. You would think this only applies to your 2 pets. However, any summoned pets, such as a Dire Beast for example, actually receives this aura debuff as well. I feel like with the little damage that Spitting Cobra does, it's also affected by this debuff aura, and yet this aura hasn't been addressed for an entire expansion. Revive Pet is also one of my other concerns with the current iteration of Beast Mastery. It lies in a 4-second cooldown, now up from 2. While this is extremely frustrating in the open world, questing, dungeoneering, and raiding environment, it doesn't even compare to how dumb this is in PvP. Any team with the slightest bit of competency can keep a hunter locked down every 4 seconds. I really do feel for anyone who wants to play this spec in Arena. Lastly, I'd just like to put it out there that I won't actually be maining BM going forward. If I could main it in Shadowlands and Marksman didn't do as much damage as it does, I absolutely would. I adore this spec and what it allows me to do in regards to helping out and being a mechanic bot. It is one of, if not, the most competitive specs to play in the raiding scene, where min-maxing is a huge deal and allows players who are so inclined to play that way. While the flow of BM is not what it was at the end of BFA due to an extreme secondary stat bloat, it is still an extremely rewarding spec to play, where your decisions on the fly actually matter. At the end of the day, for me, I'm going to play whatever's most competitive. I really hope that in the future, the Conduits carry this spec so that it eventually takes over Marksman. Don't let that deter you though, because as I said, I made it for a full expansion and I had the time of my life. It really is just a pleasure to play. Alright, well that just about wraps up the video, ladies and gentlemen, and if you have any questions about BM, feel free to drop them down in the comments below, or if you want to come ask me live, feel free to do so, as streaming is sort of my primary focus over at twitch.tv/motortv, or even jump into my Discord where you'll find a variety of resources like weak auras and extras that will help you come Shadowlands. While I am new to YouTube as of a few weeks ago, I would love your honest feedback on what you think of these videos going forward. Anyway, thank you for your time, I very much appreciate it, and best of luck in Shadowlands.